Hello, welcome to another English Sparkling with Tweedy video. I'm in a very conspicuous location for a change, largely motivated by the fact I have brought a pizza with me to the Heath and I didn't want to walk for miles and have this thing go cold. So I'm going to have some pizza and some English Sparkling. This was a last minute rash decision. It's a producer called Westwell. This wine's called Pelegrim, which I think is the old word for pilgrim, and I think it is a reference to the fact this is from Kent and they're somewhere near the Pilgrim's Way, which I think also forms part of the North Downs Way, doesn't it? I have had this wine before years and years and years ago, and to be honest, I wasn't hugely keen. I remember it was sort of all acidity and no fruit expression at that time, that particular bottle, but perhaps it's a good time to revisit, and this was just something that was available in one of my local shops. Beggars can't be choosers. But before any of that, I think I'm going to have a couple of slices of pizza. I don't know if you're interested in seeing my pizza. This is from Yard Sale Pizza, which is just one that happens to be between where I live and the Heath. And it's a pepperoni type affair. Vegan pepperoni, if you must know. But real cheese. I'm a vegetarian, not a vegan. So I'm going to probably turn the camera off for a bit, enjoy a couple of slices of pizza, and then let's open this wine up and I've got the ice bucket and everything, and see what that is like. The pressing matter of eating my dinner has been dealt with, so I can get on with the other pressing matter now and open up the wine. The pizza was pretty good. It was bit on the spicy side. It had chilies as well as that fake pepperoni. You don't need to know this, do you? On a channel about English Sparkling. And I'm not going to go into a boring aside about whether or not I think pizza pairs with English Sparkling. There's that old thing about champagne goes with everything, and I think that pretty much goes for English Sparkling as well. I think a lot of food pairing talk is a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of mumbo jumbo, to quote Mr. WC21. So Westwell Pelegrim. It's a non-vintage nowadays. I don't know if that used to possibly be a vintage wine, and there's not a huge amount of information on the back or indeed on its website, but the grapes are listed in the order Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, so that suggests probably there is more of the Chardonnay than the other two, but it is not a hard and fast rule, as I probably said before. As I say, I remember this being searingly acidic, and I love acidity in English Sparkling. I think it is one of the trademarks of the style, but it can sometimes go a little bit too far and make something just hard to really enjoy. That is a pale gold sort of a colour. Apologies if the horizon looks like it's not straight. I believe the camera is standing upright, but I am actually sat on the side of a hill. It's legitimately not straight. The first nose there is definitely appley. Even sort of apple candied apple. A nice kind of sweet, inviting sort of an apple aroma there. I do like those. You get that quite a lot in Hampshire English Sparkling wines. They often have that kind of condensed, sweet, appley sort of nose. There might be a little bit of pastry around that. It's always tempting at this point to then veer into apple tart, apple pie, that sort of thing. The pastry is a bit more viennoiserie sort of pastry, you know, croissant, pain au chocolat, that kind of thing. So is there a French pastry that involves that sort of pastry plus apples? There almost certainly is. And that's pretty nice. That's a nice start. It's all quite soft and gentle and there's no weird edges to that. Let's just give that a bit of a swirl to check we're getting all the fruit out of it. Yeah, nice sweet apple. And more of that sweet apple sort of character on the palate there. It is a fair bit sweeter than I remember it. As I say, I have a memory of this as just being searingly acidic and not much else. And that is a much more sort of sweet and sour kind of balance. There definitely is still zing there. This is very much from England, but it's got a nice, quite pleasant, I think, sort of balance of sweet and sour. But yeah, still quite a lot of zing. It is very much apple again on the palate. I suppose there might be flashes of citrus in amongst that. It tends to get a bit lost when the apple's very pronounced like this. It's nice enough. At the moment, it's feeling a little bit one-dimensional, if I'm honest. I'm getting, as I say, that sweet apple, that sweet and sour. I suppose that's a second dimension. But in terms of fruit character, it's pretty much just that one thing. There's a little bit of autolytic character in that sort of pastry note. Not a huge amount going on apart from that. But what it is doing is pretty pleasant, so I guess I can't really complain. Not 100% sure I have the serving temperature quite perfect here. Perhaps I can show you the inside of my ice bucket. It's a little bit suboptimal at the moment, but I suspect as I get towards the bottom of this bottle, it will be better chilled because the depth of the icy water is just not high enough at the moment. But those quibbles aside, a little bit simplistic. I'm not sure I would go wild about this, but as a one-off, certainly very pleasant, very drinkable. No sort of weird, rough edges that would be off-putting. And I'll perhaps come back to you later if I have further thoughts with a later glass, perhaps when the temperature's a bit better. But for now, cheers. Perhaps I'll show you a bit of my view from here. That is the view in this direction. If I stood up and angled the camera better, it would be a bit better, but you can see some of the London skyline down there. There's a nice bandstand. It's very close to one of the entrances to Hampstead Heath. Not a bit I tend to generally lurk in usually because it is all a bit too open and a lot of people around. But yeah, for a change, it was quite nice, and it did mean that my pizza didn't get completely cold. I'm probably not ideally orientated, as though I'm a stone circle or something. Orientated? Oriented? Oriented. That doesn't sound orienteered. I don't know what the word is. Probably not in the correct position / looking the correct direction to get the best out of the sunset today. I think, what time is it now? Sunset's due sometime after 7:30, so 20 minutes or so until sunset. It will probably be happening over there. I could go and walk up to the top of the hill, but it's usually a throng up there, and I'm quite enjoying this little spot here for a change. A lot of passers-by. There is a path just a few metres away from where I'm sitting. Lots of envious looks from the passers-by. Definitely envy when they're peering over, looking slightly bemused. They're thinking, why do I not have that lifestyle? Why am I not enjoying sitting by a lump of rock with a bottle of ESW? That must be what they're thinking, right? So with a bit more chilling, the nose is definitely still a candied apple, but I think that the sense of the candy has diminished a little bit, and it's a really nice, a really pleasant appley aroma now, and it's quite clean and quite pure as well. It's not, you know, appley in the way a cider would be appley, but it is undeniably appley. I feel like every time I talk about cider as a reference point in terms of ESW, I have to sort of underline again, I absolutely love cider, but it's a completely different style of drink, and there's a certain way I want apples to express in cider, which is different from how I would like apple notes to be in English sparkling. But yeah, that is a nice, condensed, sweet, quite sort of concentrated, appley sort of aroma, and with a bit more chilling. I think it is probably now at, I don't know, I'm guessing around 10 degrees, perhaps slightly under. The perception of sweetness tends to lessen a little bit when things are chilled. Melted ice cream would taste like sort of, you know, milky syrup. It would be pretty unpleasant, I imagine. But chilled ice cream, you don't notice that there is a ton of sugar in it. There is still a tussle between sweet and sour here, but now it's actually starting to feel like the sour is winning, and it's definitely not overwhelmingly zingy, but the balance feels much better here. Before, it was actually pleasant, but I just thought, wow, that's really quite sweet. And when it's chilled a little bit more, as I say, I think your ability to perceive sweetness lessens when things are cold. I'm noticing the acidity more, and that balance is actually pretty nice. It's still, as I say, a little bit kind of one-dimensional. It's doing this sweet and sour thing. It's got this nice kind of appley note. I'm not getting a lot more from this, and that could just be my ignorant palate. Perhaps there are nuances here that are going over my head. But that is nice. That is really pleasant. I think most people would approach this and think that's incredibly drinkable and just nice. Whether it sort of justifies the, you know, the English sparkling price tag, whether it evokes the Kent countryside, the North Downs, I also can't really say. But I'm enjoying this now. I think getting that serving temperature right was pretty important. A little bit simplistic, like I say, but very nice. And it is somewhat refined, I suppose. You know, this is quite different from, for example, a farmhouse cider, which is a style of drink that I absolutely love. But the apple expression here is more like, you know, apples in fancy French patisserie, rather than the apples left in a big barrel with a dead rat in it in the back of the farm, which is the way I like my cider. Yeah, good. I feel like I've babbled far too much here, but I'm enjoying that. Simple but lovely. Hopefully there'll be a little bit more sunset type action to enjoy, but I think I'm going to stop talking about the wine now. Cheers.